But that's the formula. Lard, remember, lean in, agree, reframe with your story, and then decode their body language tonality by asking, does this make sense? And then say simply, is this something you think you can do? Good morning, Sales Ascender. Yes. So let's just jump right into it. Question today came from Robert, and Robert asks this. He says, Sean, what do you say when someone tells you are just too expensive? If people tell you you're too expensive, drop a comment below. This is such an easy one to deal with, and I'm going to share some very simple framework that you can not only use to handle this objection, but you can also use the same framework to handle just about any objection that's going to come your way. So I hope you're ready for it. I'm going to share screen. So let's dive into the acronym. I'll explain what it is. So here's how you use LARD to decode your prospect and her objection. Let me go through the framework so you can understand exactly kind of how that works. First and foremost, the L. So whenever you hear an objection, think of this word lard. It's just lard. You got to lard it up. And when you have that in your memory and you remember what each of the letters means, you'll be able to handle this objection very, very simply. So the first one is this. L stands for lean in. When somebody gives you an objection, don't freak out. Don't panic. Your body language needs to say what it needs to say. Remember, 55% of communication is body language. 38 of it is how you say what you say, and 7 of it is actually the words. Let me repeat that. So 55% of your communication skills is your body language. 55%. It's probably the one we need to pay the most attention to. Secondly is how we say what we say, using things like pauses, inflection, volume, pitch, changes like that. 38% of communication is tonality, is what they call that. And then 7% is just simply the words that you actually say. Most people get stuck on these words that you have to say. So here's the move. Body language first, right? Lean in. You want to make it visual and personal. So when we do this, we say, if we're on Zoom call, right? The move for Zoom call is be like, yeah, right? You lean in. It's very subtle. It's very simple. Just lean in. You can put your hand next to your face because that shows a little bit of concern, or you can just simply just kind of lean in just a little bit. So when somebody gives you an objection, the first thing to do in this framework is literally to lean in towards them, right? That will break down their barriers of trust and likability, and it will increase the opportunity for them to jump over the action threshold and actually make a decision. The second thing we do is we agree with them, right? And it's very, very simple to do that. So the first move, lean in. Second thing is you say, you know what? You're right. And then what you do is you reframe the objection into something that can be anchored with a positive frame of mind, with something being expensive, right? So if this particular objective is you are too expensive, then you want to say, you know what, you're right. We actually are a little bit higher priced when you open and look underneath the hood, but here's the story that I'm going to tell you and how to reframe this objection. And then the last move is simply to decode with 2 very simple questions. First one is, does that make sense? Second one is this something you think you can do? Okay, so let's do a real life example because I feel like this will be the best way for you to understand how this works. So I'm just going to scroll down here. Okay, so you see, here's the example objection. You are too expensive is what they say. And very simply, if you're on the phone, the way to lean in on the phone is to just simply lower your voice because nobody can see you, but they can hear you. Remember, 38% of your communication style is the way you say, how you say, what you say. So very simply, if you're on the phone, just drop your voice a little bit. Like, you know what? You're right, right? And then agree. Like I said, you know what? You're right. We are a few points more expensive than our competitors. So I'll just highlight this so you can see it. You're right. We're a few more points expensive. You got to have practice this, right? See, even I mess it up, but it's like, you know what? You're right. We are a few more points than our competitors, but I don't believe this is something that should cause you to turn us down. And for example, I would then choose a story to reframe the thought process in their mind. And so very simple, I would say something like this. You know, this reminds me of my tennis game. See, I used to always invest in these tennis shoes that were about $100. And I found that over the years of doing this, that these $100 pairs of tennis shoes would last about 25 tennis matches for me. And that to me was, I feel it's acceptable. It's like a good amount, like, $100 for 25, games or matches seems like a good thing. But then I found this opportunity where I could actually go invest in a pair of tennis shoes that only cost $50. I was like, hey, great deal. They almost look very similar to the brand name that I normally buy. And, you can enter your nice big brand name. Like a lot of people like to name drop so they can equate mentally like to a higher brand name. So for example, so like tennis shoes I typically buy are Adidas tennis shoes. They're about $100 and they usually last me about 25 tennis matches. And that's been my standard for the last 10 years of me playing tennis. But then I found these other shoes and I thought, well, hey, look, they're half as much as my $100. So they're actually on sale or discount or whatever you want to call it for $50 and they look very similar. So I bought them for $50. I thought, oh my gosh, what a great deal. And I put these tennis shoes on and you know what? At first they felt exactly like my Adidas $100 pair of tennis shoes. But then what I realized is after my fourth match, these things started to fall apart. The seams ripped. The glue started to come off. Sometimes I scrape my foot when I serve. And so like there was a hole that was actually forming. And that usually didn't form on my $100 pair of tennis shoes until match about 20. These are happening on match 4. So the lifespan of my actual tennis shoes, the $50 version versus the $100 version, only lasted 5 matches. And that's the same here, right? It may look good if it's less expensive, but the longevity that you're going to get out of it's probably not worth that. And this is why we actually are maybe a little bit higher priced than the next guys, because we want the longevity for you and not just for the shoe to look good and then just die out after 5 matches. And literally now I've reframed this story in a way that people are like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense, Sean. I get that. I'm with you. And you can see it as you're watching them, like look at their body language. If you're talking on Zoom or you're talking face to face, and then like watch how they're actually acting. And then you'll be like, oh my gosh, like you totally get what I'm saying. You're picking up what I'm laying down. That's cool. Great. Now you know what your reframe story has actually hit. You've made the point. It's all about longevity. It's not just about the initial look. That's important. But what's important is the use of the item, use of the service, use of the product, whatever it is that you're selling. And then you simply do the last letter in LARD is decode. You want to decode. You saw it visually. Remember, 55% of communication is body language. 38% is the way people say what they say. 7% is the words. So now look, you've been watching them as you're telling them this story. Now it takes practice. You got to continue practicing these things. But you're watching these people and you see their body language start to tweak or turn or change. And you're like, okay, great. I understand verbally, I'm visually, I'm seeing that the people are nodding with me. That's why I use the word right a lot in my conversation. I learned that one from Russell Brunson, right? See how I just did that? And so I get them to start nodding. Yes, this is a subconscious move to say, yes, this I'm interested. And then literally now you just decode the rest of it. And you simply see the body language. Now you have to ask for confirmation on the body language. You say, well, does that make sense to you? And you wait and they'll say yes. And as soon as they say yes, you say, okay, cool. Well, is this something you think you can do? It's the only closed question you ever need to close any size deal that you ever want on planet Earth. I promise. I've used it. And so literally that's all it takes. And here's what's going to happen. When you ask that last question, you've decoded this objection. It's gone. It's off the table. You've just reframed the whole thing. They're in a better space about it. And now you say, does that make sense? And they agree with you. Objection is gone, right? And then secondly is this something you think you can do? And you can say that, like, I literally practice that line. I tell you what, if you want to close more deals, is this something you think you can do? Go in the mirror, say that like 20 million times to yourself. Literally, you will come out and use that question when you need to use a question to close a deal. It will happen. Is this something you think you can do? Right. And then you just got to say it with the right tonality, this right speed, pitch, tone, everything. When you drop it in there, people are going to be like, well, yeah, it is. Okay, great. Close deal. What's the next step? Right? And say, well, and then they're going to think about it for a minute, and then they're going to throw another objection. No problem. Lean in again, right? You have a chance to use the LARD formula once again. LARD proves to win the game. So literally, when you find your first objection after you've, at the end of the sales conversation or whenever you're presenting or whatever someone brings up an objection, use this formula, LARD, right? It's LARD. Just lean in, agree. Yeah, you're right. We are a few points higher than most of our competitors. But this actually reminds me of when I used to buy, and then reframe into the story. and make their point, and you can actually like compare yourself to premium brands. I've seen people do this with like Tesla. Like if, for example, another objection would be you're late to market with your product, or your software as a service is late to market. And you say, yeah, we are late, but there's actually a pretty big reason for that. Now, have you ever heard of Tesla? You know, when they released Model 3 or the Model X, in fact, they started with the Roadster. They had 1 and 2 and 3 year delays. Why do you think they did that? Because they wanted to work out all the bugs so they could create the best customer experience possible. And that's the same thing we tried to do. That's why we're a little bit late to market. And that's my reframe story. And then I would say, does that make sense? And you're going to say yes. And then you say, is this something you think you can do? And literally once you've handled that objection, you can move on. So you can use LARD. I love this. You can use LARD anywhere you get an objection in a sales conversation. I think it's hilarious. But that's the formula. LARD, remember, lean in, agree, reframe with your story, and then decode their body language tonality by asking, does this make sense? And then say simply, is this something you think you can do? And that, my friends, is how you'd handle that objection. I think it's a great one. Robert, that was an awesome question. Thank you so much for asking that. By the way, if you got value from this high ticket tune-up today, please smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already there. I'll see you tomorrow.